let's go down the road. Sound like fun?
Yeah.
All right. What if the wood's still wet? Hang on a minute. I had a 1968 Telecaster neck that was sprayed with polyester. And it was the same tooling as a 63 Tele neck, but all they had done was they had changed the finish from nitro to poly. So I stripped off the polyester, and now I have an old neck, okay? It came apart in my office. The insert started to come out. The thing had been like a swimming pool. It had been dry. It had been coated with plastic, and the water had been contained in that neck for its entire life. And when I took the finish off, all the water started to come out. Kiln drying in the early days were you would get it down to 7% and use it. But when you don't kiln dry it really well, it'll be like 12 or 13%. If you've got a table in your grandparents' house and it's been sitting there for 100 years, it's about 6.5% to 7% water because the wood picks up water from the air. That's normal. So you want it to be that. That's why they call it kiln drying, right? If you do that to a fretboard, this is the second problem, what happens in the first winter and all the frets stick out the side of the neck? Is that a good guitar? So that happens because the fingerboard shrinks and the frets don't. That's not good. That would be bad, right? What if the headstock angle's too much? What happens? No, it goes out of tune. And if it's too shallow, what happens? It sounds like crap. So on a Telecaster, the string goes over the nut on the low E and goes straight for the tuning peg. It's got lots of angle. By the G string, there's no angle on that thing, and people used to go up there and use it as a tremolo. But the G string never sounded as good as the low E string, and then they put a little string tree to give it angle again on the high E and B, and so all the headstock angles of all the strings were different on those, and it's important that you have something that's enough to give some break over the nut, but not too much that it goes out of tune. That will be a problem, right? What happens if the tuning pegs have slop in them and it doesn't stay in tune? What happens if the shaft binds up in the grommet? What happens if, the tuning peg, huh?
What is slop?
Have you ever heard of a pig? That would be what they lay in, slop.
But I would think...
Slop in a machining term is when the worm and the gear are not meshed up well and there's slop in it and it's got a lot of wiggle room. That's a normal machining term.
Ever drive an old car with the steering wheel?
The steering wheel's got slop in it. That's the same thing where you turn the tuning peg back and turn it up and it's got this big range where nothing happens.
Sorry, I guess they all knew, but I didn't. I only sell good guitars with no slop.
You opened every single Guitar Center on the East Coast. Right? As Richie Ash said, I never met a more fierce competitor. Didn't he say that about you? Because you walked right into his town and set up shop with no feeling whatsoever other than, what fun!
His mother told me that standing in line to go into a restaurant at the NAMM show, she looked at she said, "You're Peter Schultz?"
Yeah.
She said, "I'm Richie Ash's mom." I said, "No, I'm Bernice." "Hi, Bernice." We had this little chat. She said, "Yeah." Richie said, "You're the devil incarnate."
So I saw in the NAMM show, in the bar at the Hilton, Michael Dealey walk up to Richard Ash, and Larry Thomas. He says, "Why don't I just get you a map and a bunch of push pins and you'd be done with it right here." In other words, where are you gonna put your stores? Who's gonna be across the street?
So for those of you, Richie Ash is the CEO of Ash. Sam Ash. And Larry Thomas at that time was the CEO, co-CEO of Guitar Center. So
we'll just get you a map and some push pins. Why don't you just get done with the argument, right?
It was a race to see who could open up in whose backyard first.
And he was assigned to open up on the East Coast.
Yeah, New York, well, yeah. Boston, Florida, and then New York Metro.
So, all right, so we'll agree that tuning pegs have some impact on it, right? Okay, what happens if you make the nut out of the same material you hook your toilet to your septic tank with? No, actually, I'm not. It stinks, really. You're gonna go there. We've got young kids here. I really. Look,
It flushes.
just because it looks like bone doesn't mean it is bone. And there's lots of instruments where they make the nut out of PVC plastic. It looks good. It would only have cost another $1.50 to put a bone nut on it, but no, they had to put a cheap plastic one on, right? Now,
What about those?
now hang on a minute.
Nylon nuts in regular stuff.
Okay, but if the old nylon was way more crispy than the new stuff they're using. Okay, but that's different. Hendrix's guitar had what's called it's a kind of plastic. They made plates. You can get plates at Goodwill Industries. You know, you go to Goodwill store. Melamine, yeah. Now, and I'm sorry, he's sounding just fine. So you don't really need a bone nut, but you need something hard that doesn't absorb the sound. Okay, so making the nut out of something that is soft is not really a good idea. Now, worse is that you don't glue the nut in. Under a microscope, if you don't glue it in, almost nothing touches under a microscope. Only a couple atoms touch it. When Fender and Gibson did it in the 50s, there was all this glue underneath and all around it to fill all the gaps in and hold it in place. There are so many guitars in this world where the nut's not glued in. You literally take the strings off and touch it and it falls off. Does that sound like a good idea? It's not a good idea. So the guitar is ringing like crazy, right? Or it's not. Do you think putting a truss rod in a plastic tube that deadens the whole thing a good idea? It keeps it from rattling, but I don't think it's a real good idea, right? So we're just going to go on and on and on and on about how soft the finish is, how thick the finish is, what's the bridge made out of, and we all know an ES335 with nylon saddles on the bridge is not a good idea. Everybody changes them over to brass, except on the 335 that Clapton played because he was so good at doing that. So there's a million things that can mess up a guitar, and when I start to make this list around these things, it's incredibly important because I'll give you an example. If you don't glue the frets in, I would have people bring their Ibanez guitars into my shop, and after sweating on the guitar all weekend, the frets weren't level anymore again, and I have to level them again. And when you level the frets on a guitar that the frets haven't been glued in, they squeak like crazy. They make this racket, right? When they're glued in well, they're literally held in place. The glue's not there to actually glue onto the metal. The glue's there to make a mold around the teeth so it doesn't move. And you know, how about the edge of the neck is too sharp or it doesn't round over, and every time you grab the neck it kind of hurts your hand. And you know, we can go on and on and on and on about all the things that are messed up that make a guitar not a good guitar. But the good exaggerated one is the one I started with. Let's just put the third fret in the wrong place, and we ruined it.